Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is the third part of the conversation we're having about crime and deviance and social control. The study of crime and deviance has evolved dramatically over 150 years, moving from biological determinism to psychological explanations of deviance and crime, and then sociological theories, and then we moved towards interdisciplinary approaches that blend together biology, psychology, genetics, social theory, and cultural analysis. So we start the analysis from the biological theories, which marked criminals as born criminals. In early positivism in the 19th century, the first scientific approaches to crime sought to find causes in the body, human body. Early criminologists believed deviant behavior was inherited or biologically determined, that some people were naturally predisposed to crime. This marked a shift from religious or moral explanation of sin or evil or witchcraft or those kind of stuff towards positivist science. The key figures and figures in biological determinism and on crime was Cesare Lombroso in 1876. The Criminal Man, the book he published called The Criminal Man, claiming criminals had atavistic features, that physical traits, that large jaws or asymmetrical faces, long arms, something tells us, their body tells us that they are from criminal families. And that was kind of resembled primitive humans. And then a couple more, that Enrico Ferri and Raffaello Garofalo, interesting names, expanded on Lombroso, arguing that biology interacts with social environment, that they can have biologically determined features, and then the social environment comes in play, and then either that kind of like helps them to get better or not to crime, or worsens their features of criminality. Therefore, environment has some influence over biological traits. Then the critic, there is a critic of biological explanation of crime and deviance. We don't do that anymore. These theories were highly deterministic and later described or discredited for the racism, sexism, and lack of empathy, empirical validity. So, however, though, the significance of these theories, it established the scientific study of deviance. We started somewhere. The idea that deviance can be studied, explained, and predicted, not just punished or moralized. That was a big step forward. So instead of like just determining and punishing them, we moved towards that studying, explaining, and predicting them. The second wave of understanding deviance and criminal behavior attributed to psychological theories, the personality, mental illness, and cognitive explanations in the early and mid-20th century. As psychology developed, attention shifted from the body to mind. Criminals were now seen as psychologically abnormal, driven by mental illness, emotional conflict, or faulty learning. Major approaches were that psychoanalytic theory by Freud in early 1900s. He looked at crime as resulting from unresolved inner conflicts or an overactive id and the weak superego. He was talking about egos and superegos. And then there is the behavioral theories by Skinner in 1950s that looked at deviance as learned behavior through conditioning, rewarding and reinforced in social contexts. If we reward criminal behavior, that person can become criminal. If we punish them on time or don't reward them, that can slowly disappear. And then we had cognitive theories that emphasized distorted thinking patterns, lack of empathy, or moral reasoning defects that many scholars looked into cognitive theories. Personality and trait approaches, they are, some individuals possess antisocial or psychopathic traits that predispose them to deviance. They have these traits, and then they do deviant or act deviant or do crime because of this predisposed traits. So the critic of psychological understanding of crime and deviance was it overemphasizes on individual pathology and neglect social context like poverty, inequality, culture, abuse in the family, or criminogenic environments. However, these theories paved the way for modern forensic psychology and rehabilitation models because we still use psychological understanding of crime and deviance to address certain crimes and deviance. And then sociological theories, that is 20th century onward, looked at crime and deviance as society as the source of deviance, that we create deviance as we construct norm, we also construct deviance. Therefore, our understanding of deviance and a norm and deviance should shift from people to those who create them. Sociology revolutionized the field of shifting focus from individual to society. Deviance was no longer as a defect in people, but as a normal and necessary product of social life. In sociological approaches, if we looked at structural functionalism or conflict theory or even symbolic interactionism, we can see how these theories explaining deviant behavior and why that happens in society. What's the function of them? For example, structural functionalist approach. Emily Durkheim argued deviance is normal. Every society produces rule breaking to clarify norms and straighten social cohesion. So understanding what is a norm and what's deviance brings people together and unites them against certain sorts of crime because that crimes can hurt society. He says something like deviance affirms cultural values and norms, clarifies moral boundaries, and promotes social unity. Durkheim's work was continued by Robert Merton in his typology, the strain theory. He talks about crime resulting from when society promotes cultural goals and there is institutionalized means to achieve them, and not everybody is equipped to achieve cultural goals through institutionalized means. Therefore, crime and deviance happens emerges from being not able to achieve them through institutionalized means, or there are blockages to legitimate means for achieving them. Deviance in Merton's typology viewed as innovation born of inequality. So there is interactionist approach that Howard Baker talked about labeling theory. Deviance is not inherent in an act, but it's a result of social labeling. Deviance is created by society's reaction, not by the individual action or doing deviant act. And then there's Lemert, distinguished primary deviance, initial rule breaking from secondary deviance, identity formed by labeling, that people internalize the labeling and then actually create or form identity around that label. That's also called self-fulfilling prophecy, that we label people and that leads to internalization of that label. And then there is another set of scholars talk about stigma. For example, Goffman in 1960s, he talked about deviance as a spoiler identity. Social labeling shapes self-concept. And then if you look at the conflict theories, starting from Karl Marx, he talks about laws reflect the interests of the ruling class. He calls them bourgeoisie. Deviance is often form of resistance by poor people, or he calls proletariat. And feminist criminologists or sociologists talk about 1970s and onward. They examine how deviance is gendered, women's crimes and victimization are shaped by patriarchy. And I would say that I teach criminology courses, and the gender was absent from earlier criminology, the understanding of crime, because women were staying inside, therefore they didn't have access to resources, institutions, organizations. They stayed home, and if they do crime, it was just very minor crimes, and they were viewed as they have to be angelic, or crime is total opposite of what women should be. Therefore, they were absent from understanding of crime. And later on, a liberation theory explains that by liberating women from home and allowing them to go to university and just work outside of house, introduce them to the new social spheres, therefore they start to commit crime like their counterparts. And also that feminization of poverty is another cause of women or gendered crimes. Women usually does or do property crimes, that shoplifting, the property kind of crimes, where men more identified with aggressive or fight-related crimes in society. And then post-colonial and race-critical approaches, they look at how deviance and crime is racialized. We know about police brutality in America, or even in Canada. Policing and punishment maintain racial hierarchies that critical race theory talks about them, or Angela Davis's writings. They talk about racialization of deviance and crime. And there's so much about this that starting point for white and black men and men like humanity, that the whiteness is defined as innocent. The starting point is innocent. And then if they commit crime for some reasons, that psychological other reasons, they committed crime. When it comes to Black people or people of color, the default is actually deviant. And then they have to fight for their innocence if they didn't commit any crime. That kind of like understanding in our time, opening new doors to deeper analyzing, the racial difficulties or understanding of criminality and deviance from the racial point of view. Control and subcultural theories, Travis Hershey, for example, 1969, he talks about social control theory. People conform because of social bonds, family, education, attachment, and commitment. Also, there's other Sutherland's theories. For example, they talk about if people connected with their families, if they have friends, the chances of committing crime is less because they care about their reputation. So whatever group you are interacting with, it has an influence has an influence on a person. So differential association theory by Sutherland actually explains this much better. Subcultural theories, Coward and Auckland, they talk about deviance arising from alternative value systems. Subcultures, they are the small cultures within culture. They can be subculture that they perhaps have different values. However, they accept the societal institutionalized rules. That countercultures, on the other hand, they are against the whole system. They want to get rid of this system and build new one. They have alternative ways of building society. Revolutionaries can be example of that, or terrorists can be example of that. So that's subcultural, countercultural theories that understands deviance and crime. The final one is interdisciplinary approaches. Today, we use interdisciplinary approaches beyond the social, integrative, and global perspectives that developed in 20th and 21st centuries. In recent decades, scholars recognize that no single discipline can explain crime and deviance. Modern approaches integrate biological, psychological, social, and cultural factors. They use all these factors to understand crime and also prevent them or address them in society. And biological criminology reconciles biology and sociology, genes, hormones, neurological factors like interact with the environment, stress, trauma, poverty, focus on epigenetics, like how environment turns on biological predispositions, seeks to avoid determinism. Biology is not destiny, but part of complex system. Now we are changing our understanding of biological understanding of crime. Cultural and media studies, they examine how media construct deviance and moral panics, coming from Stanley Cohen, 1970s. It studies how globalization, social media, and surveillance redefine norms and social control and how that affect our understanding of deviance and crime. It connects to postmodern theories like Foucault and others. Power now operates through visibility, normalization, and discourse, not just punishment. Also, intersectional and post-colonial criminology coming from Greenshaw. It talks about it brings together sociology, critical race theory, gender studies, and anthropology to understand how deviance is constructed through race, class, gender, religion, and colonial powers. For example, the policing of Muslim bodies, terrorism, discourse, or the criminalization of migration is some of the areas that consider this kind of intersectional views of crime and deviance. And then there is cognitive and neurosociological approaches that interdisciplinary field, the neuropsychology, cultural neuroscience, explore how brain, culture, and socialization interact and how that affects crime and deviance. So the overall trajectory was long, and people started at some point and they keep studying, and we are in the process of studying deviance and crime. And in summary, the study of crime and deviance has evolved immensely, from biological essentialism to psychological individualism to sociological contextualism to, I can't even speak today, to interdisciplinary complexity. Each of these phases broadened our understanding from who commits crime to how society defines and responds to it. So this, without understanding all this biological, psychological, social, and the interdisciplinary, we cannot really understand crime well. And this study started, although the earlier studies criticized a lot, this is how we advance. If we criticize something, we build on it. So criticizing biological understanding of crime and deviance lead to looking for other factors like psychological, social, environmental, and so on. So the key takeaway from this short lecture is the study of deviance is really the study of humanity, how we explain, justify, and regulate difference, like what is norm and what is deviance, how we differentiate them. From skulls and gens to social structures and algorithms, our theories of deviance reflect our evolving understanding of what it means to be human, what it means to be moral, and what it means to be social. So this is the short explanation, or trying to understand how intellectual intellects about deviance and crime evolved over time, and so we can understand this process. Thank you. See you.